Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Wednesday, September the 10th, 2025. Today I want to talk about France because there's just been a confidence motion in the National Assembly which the government lost, so that means that the Prime Minister has now handed in his resignation, and so it does seem that France is going to be entering a period of further political chaos. And so in this video I want to have another look at what is going on in France, looking for example at the horoscope of Emmanuel Macron and the outgoing Prime Minister François Bayrou, when we mustn't, of course, forget about Marine Le Pen and her chart. Great thing about France, one of the best thing about France, perhaps, is that they're very good about times of birth. So, if you've got a French politician, even a French politician that you haven't heard of, and you look up their chart, you invariably find that we have a time of birth, and it just makes things so much easier. So before I talk about France, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Wednesday, September the 10th, 2025. So here is the chart for today. And, don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So on Wednesday, New York time, at noon, the moon is at 27 degrees and 32 minutes Aries. So the moon is in very late Aries. It's just separating from a trine to Venus and a square to Jupiter, and then it moves into Taurus. Quite when it moves into Taurus kind of depends, doesn't it? If you are in the United Kingdom, for example, the moon moves into Taurus this evening at 3 minutes past 9. If you're in Paris, it would be at 3 minutes past 10. So in Europe and Africa, very late in the day, the moon moves into Taurus. And that might just be too late. You might not feel the impact of the moon changing sign, or indeed changing element as well, moving from a fire sign into an earth sign. But if you're in the Americas, then last part of the day, there is a change. So 9:03 London time is going to be 3 minutes, just around 4 o'clock, just after 4 o'clock in the afternoon in New York. The moon moves into Taurus just after 1 o'clock, around lunchtime in California and the West and the Pacific coast. The moon moves into Taurus, and if you're in Hawaii, that's going to be this morning that the moon moves into Taurus. But it's perhaps a split day, and a split day maybe in terms of how you experience it, whether you're in Australia compared to the US, because there is a big difference, even Europe, because moon in Taurus, that's a great place for the moon, but not everyone is going to be able to benefit from that. So that does make it difficult, though we can still look at the sort of the general aspects that the moon is making as it changes sign. So as it changes sign, the moon is it makes an opposition to Mars, and it's making a conjunction to Chiron. I mean, moon opposition Mars, moon in Aries, Mars in Libra, and perhaps also it's making a square to Jupiter. I mean, that's perhaps a bit remote, but moon opposition Mars, can be a difficult aspect. It can be about wanting to take the lead and trying to take the initiative, but then we're up against Mars. Something gets in our way, and taking the lead often has a cost, might have a cost, and not everyone will appreciate it. So there could be some friction today, and that might be a feature of what's happening. And when the moon moves into Taurus, it of course makes a square to Pluto. So late in the day, certainly moon square Pluto, and moon in Aries square Pluto. The question is, moon in Taurus square Pluto. there is the question, how do we assert ourselves? How do we exert our power? There's always a way, but it just might not be very easy. And one other aspect that's coming in is a semi-sextile between Venus and Jupiter. It doesn't matter where you are. I think this Venus-Jupiter semi-sextile, could be important. So Venus and Jupiter, they're 30 degrees apart. 30 degrees, it can be difficult because, very often in astrology, signs that are next to each other are very different from one another. So Venus in Leo plays Jupiter in Cancer. So Venus in Leo, you could say, well, that's quite proud and it's quite positive and, wanting attention and perhaps getting attention as well. But Jupiter in Cancer is more sensitive, more considered, and perhaps the challenge is to certainly believe in oneself, but also to be subtle. We don't have to shout. We don't have to demand attention in order to get attention. And so perhaps the best way of dealing with this Venus semi-sextile Jupiter is to have some modesty, even if we don't feel particularly modest ourselves, and perhaps have some faith in other people. Perhaps have some faith in the world that in the end we will be recognized, and we don't have to necessarily make a big fuss about it. So that's the picture in sort of New York. If we set the chart for Sydney, Australia, then the big difference is that the moon is just earlier in the sign. The moon is at sort of 19 degrees Aries, and you could say that the main aspect, if you are in Australia, New Zealand, East Asia, is going to be a trine between the moon and Venus, and that's pretty straightforward, pleasant aspect. Moon and Venus in fire signs. There's a degree of enthusiasm, and we can get on with people sort of relatively well. Well, I say we. I mean, I'm not in Australia. If you are in Australia. I think that try to focus on other people and doing what you can to forge links with them, because I think that Moon Venus trine could be very helpful. And then there is the heliocentric view, putting the Sun at the center of the solar system. And what's happening is that Venus is starting to get quite close to Jupiter. So heliocentric Venus is at sort of 6 Cancer. Heliocentric Jupiter is at 10 Cancer. So they are getting close. And also we've got Mercury in heliocentric Virgo, moving to a sextile of Jupiter. And I think that these aspects are pretty pleasant. I mean, I think that Mercury sextile Jupiter gives us enthusiasm. It allows us to be positive, however difficult things might be in the short term and how complicated they might be. We do live in complicated times. In spite of all of that, Mercury sextile Jupiter and also Mercury sextile Venus gives us a wider view and perhaps allows us to see the possibilities going forward, and at the same time we can have some self-confidence, confidence about ourselves and what we can do. Now, I know this is a heliocentric set of aspects, but you could argue that the way it works, or rather the way astrology is working, is that whatever is the strongest aspect at the time gets the attention. And normally one focuses on geocentric aspects, but today there are a lot of lunar aspects, but I don't think geocentrically I don't think there's a great deal going on. But heliocentrically there is some fortunate aspects. I think that Venus conjunct Jupiter, Mercury making a sextile to that conjunction, I think that gives us a positivity that I think that we can really tune into, and it's not just the sextile between Mercury and Jupiter. Mercury is indeed applying to a sextile with Mars. So some things can be easier than expected, provided we go with the flow. And I mean, I know that one uses this term "go with the flow" rather too much. I mean, it's almost a cliche, going with the flow. But so one has to kind of qualify that, and one has to say, well, the universe wants things to be done in a particular way. If you align yourself to the universe, then, well, things are going to be easy. You can go with the flow. If you're doing something that is unnatural, that is at odds with the cosmos, well, then it's going to be hard work. It's going to be super hard work, and the harder you try, the more difficult it's going to become. So really, do tune into that sextile, those sextile aspects, and the fact that Venus is moving towards a conjunction of Jupiter. There are things to be positive about, and maybe change in itself is something positive. That we are moving from one thing to another, one attitude to another, and so that is something perhaps that we should really try to tune into. So now let me look at the 12 signs. And, I'm not convinced that there's a huge amount going on today, as I've just said. Yesterday, likewise, there wasn't much going on. I think my readings of the 12 signs were relatively short yesterday, on Tuesday. And I think that may be the same for today, Wednesday. So let's see what we find. So these are my readings for the 12 signs, my forecast for the 12 signs for today, which is Wednesday, September the 10th, 2025. Aries, you are in the process of sorting things out and wrapping things up, and you haven't necessarily got all the time in the world, and so perhaps at the moment you're feeling quite enthusiastic. You're thinking about all the things that you can do, and I'm hoping that you really are able to get them together, to perhaps to bring your ideas into the open, and to be enthusiastic about it. And so if you've got something you want to do, do make sure you do it, and ideally do it as quickly as possible. I mean, you don't want to be so hasty that you make mistakes. I don't want you to be in too much of a hurry. But, if you leave things too long, or if you get sidetracked, then it's possible that you miss your moment. And so Aries, do give it your best shot. And at the same time, do find a way of negotiating your way around the various obstacles that you might come across. There is today an opposition aspect between the Moon and Mars. Moon in Aries, opposition Mars in Libra, and this opposition can be difficult. It might represent a person or a situation that you don't feel comfortable with, and it could make you aggressive, or could make someone else aggressive, and it may be quite difficult to find agreement, unless you are very subtle. You've got to make a special effort to listen and try to understand what other people are thinking without completely going the other way and without completely compromising yourself. So, it is important to get that balance right. But in the final analysis, Aries, it matters that you understand your own power. At the moment, you are capable of making things happen. And the question is, how far do you go? How far do you need to go? And so it may be that if you have some subtlety, if you look at a problem, that you can perhaps work your way around the problem, without necessarily breaking things. If you've got a pile of rocks in front of you, it might be tempting to use explosives. Well, no, not literally explosives, but to use sort of a symbolic explosive force, or to use a sledgehammer to crack a peanut. But I don't think that's necessary. I think that Aries, if you can just use your feelings, use your intuition, then I think that in the end, you're going to be able to find a way through. And today, do use your initiative, and don't think that things are going to stay the same forever. Because when the moon moves into Taurus, and it might move into Taurus relatively early in the day if you're in the Americas, this morning if you're in Hawaii. But when the moon moves into Taurus, you just might find that things slow down. And okay, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon is not going to move into Taurus until tomorrow. But when the moon does move into Taurus, things could slow down, and it might be sort of more difficult to get things done. And so think about what matters today, and find a way of doing it, because there is a way of doing it. I'm not saying it's going to be 100% easy, but if you use your intuition and your subtlety, I do think that you will find a way through. Now, turning to relationships, as I've already indicated, Moon is making an opposition to Mars, and Moon opposition Mars, it can be a difficult aspect, and it's across the main axis of your chart. And so because you've got Moon in Aries, Mars in Libra, so main axis of your chart. And so if you really try to get close to people, you try to involve yourself in what other people are doing, you may soon become aware that you and the other person have a difference of approach. And that difference of approach could be quite major. And so you have to be careful, but you can't be too careful. I mean, you've got to look after yourself. You've got to advocate for your own interests, but you perhaps can do it in a way in which no one gets too annoyed. So there is a way around it. And so Aries, I'm not saying that it's going to necessarily be an easy day, but I think that if you understand your priorities and you use your subtlety, then I think that you can find a way through. Taurus. At first, you might not feel that much is happening. Things do feel somewhat slow, and you're not necessarily going to be in the mood to reveal too much about yourself. Some things are perhaps best kept hidden, and that's great, provided you're not too annoyed about it. This can be a Taurean trait, to sort of brood. You want things done. You want to express yourself. You have opinions. But you kind of keep it all to yourself, and then as a result, you just could get annoyed, perhaps with yourself, and that is not ideal. And so, Taurus, if you are annoyed about something, if you are brooding, if you feel a bit like a pressure cooker, then you probably have to vent a bit. Isn't that what doesn't a pressure cooker have a vent button? And so you have to let off some steam, but you have to let off steam in a constructive way. And it could be that you might need to do some exercise, provided that's medically okay, and doing some exercise, finding a way of working off any tension. That's certainly the right approach. Now, there is potentially a sign change, because the moon is in Aries. It's getting ready to move into Taurus, and when the moon does move into Taurus, it it certainly creates a change. So when does the moon into Taurus? Well, if you're in Europe or Africa, the moon doesn't move into Taurus until fairly late this evening, and so there may not be much of a chance to utilize the moon moving into Taurus. Now, if you're in the Americas, then this afternoon the moon goes into Taurus, and so that does represent a big change. So whenever the moon does move into Taurus, it straight away makes a square to Pluto, and this square to Pluto is a different energy. Suddenly you do become more focused, and you realize that some things are important, and they perhaps might be worth getting obsessed about. And so if you want to just throw all your energy or your remaining energy into something, then I would suggest go ahead. Even if you're in Europe and you find that the moon is moving into Taurus, it's square Pluto at sort of 9 in the evening. Well, maybe there are a few hours left of the day. Maybe there's something you can do in those couple of hours. Maybe you can make a decision that you are going to get something. You are going to succeed in a particular way, because I think it's a great aspect, moon square Pluto, at least if you're a Taurus. And also Taurus, you might feel at times today that you are tense, that you can't express things, that you somehow need to vent, but it's not always easy. But if you try to communicate, if you try to tell people what is on your mind, and even if you express some anger, it may not be as difficult as you think. And once you start talking with passion and intensity, even while the moon is moving through Aries, I think that you'll be quite effective, and you may find that you are releasing something through the power of your words, through your self-expression. So Taurus, when you look at today, at first you might feel quite powerless. You might feel that you're just not in the mood, but it needn't be like this. And at the same time, don't forget that we looked at the heliocentric chart earlier. Heliocentrically, Venus is making a conjunction to Jupiter. Venus is also making a sextile to Mercury. And so these are heliocentric aspects. And because they are heliocentric aspects, they work at a higher level, perhaps at a higher level than geocentric aspects. And they are more subtle. But if you just give yourself peace and quiet, as you should be able to do, and you just listen and you feel, where you're being taken, and you kind of feel where things are going, then you might, to your surprise, feel that things aren't so bad, that you are on the right path, you're on the right track, and that it's all going to be okay. And when that moon makes a square to Pluto, whether it's today or tomorrow, that moon square Pluto could really galvanize you and could allow you to sort of take all that positivity that you're tuning into sort of on a fairly cosmic level and just turn it into something real and concrete. Gemini. Right now, Gemini, the moon is in the process of changing sign. It's sort of late Aries, early Taurus, and I think that for most of the day, perhaps all of the day, you're going to be fairly sociable. I think you're going to want to be with people. On your own, you might feel restless. You might feel that something is missing, but other people, are or can be a problem. I think it was Jean-Paul Sartre who was a Gemini who said that hell is other people, famously, and so other people could be a problem. And there is an opposition between the moon and Mars. So just because you want to be with other people, doesn't necessarily mean that you should be. It just might feel unsatisfying at best, and at worst, you might realize that you can't get on with everyone. You don't get on with everyone. And, there are things you want to do. There are things you regard as being important, but as far as other people are concerned, are just meaningless. They don't appreciate it. So, don't put, too much store in your social life. And if you do find yourself being in company, there is the possibility of disappointment, even rejection, because the moon is making a conjunction to Chiron. Chiron is the wound, the wounded healer, the wounded socialite, maybe. And so, just be ready for a bit of disappointment, and just don't think that people are necessarily going to be able to deliver, especially on an intellectual and an inspirational level. And at some stage, Gemini, you might sort of recognize that you don't need other people. It's not necessary. The moon will move into Taurus at some stage, and so when the moon moves into Taurus, I think that you're going to slow down, and you might then be in a position, when you can sort of explore, and exploration could be important, and through exploration, there could be a breakthrough. Not necessarily an easy breakthrough, just a realization that something has to change, that there is another opportunity, there is another way of doing things, and that could, in its own way, be quite transforming. And also, Gemini, I think that over the course of the day, whether the moon is in Aries or Taurus, you are going to be quite tense, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, because if you're feeling tense, it's just a sign that things could be better, that things could change. And, you are aware, certainly, of, all the sort of limitations that are around you. But you're also aware of the possibilities of creating big change, perhaps explosive change. You're aware of all of that. And it's perhaps not a time for doing things gradually. Either you accept things as they are, or you make a breakthrough. You do something, and you are perhaps quite dramatic about it, and that might be the approach. So, Gemini, I'm not really saying that it's going to be an easy day, and I think that you may well be disappointed by other people, but if you can rely on yourself, then it's not so bad. And remember, heliocentrically, Mercury is making a sextile to Jupiter, and this Mercury sextile Jupiter can make everyone's life better heliocentrically, and it's about being able to look beyond the current situation, and perhaps to see that the current situation, it might not be great, but it's not going to last so much longer. And so you can see the way forward, and you can also see that you have the capacity to really make the most of opportunities and challenges that will be coming up in the not so distant future. Cancer. You still have things that really should be done. You may be finishing them off. That's possible, but you need to make sure that it really is done properly. And don't make assumptions. Don't just stop trying once you're 90% of the way there. Don't assume that anyone is going to finish something off for you. Be there until the end, And this is a good way of executing your responsibility, because there is a responsibility at the moment, and it's not a responsibility that you necessarily take particularly willingly, but it needs to be done. And so Cancer, think about what you need to do, and also it's not about necessarily just keeping the status quo. Sometimes you have to shake things up. Today there is a conjunction between the Moon and Chiron, and this Moon Chiron conjunction may make you feel sorry for yourself. I mean, Chiron, the wounded healer. I mean, that's one way of looking at it. But you could also say that the Moon conjunct Chiron represents you forcing yourself to do something differently. And that could be what Chiron is about. Chiron is the maverick. Chiron, doesn't like to just follow the sort of existing order, and wants to perhaps shake things up a bit. And so if you notice that people are complacent, that people are doing things in the same old way, that you're being taken for granted, maybe. I'm not saying you will be taken for granted, but you could be taken for granted. Then you need to change things. And with Moon conjunct Chiron, that's something that you very much can do. And if you want to be noticed as an innovator, as someone who might even be a disruptor, then I think that with that Moon conjunct Chiron, that's certainly something you very much are able to sort of pull off. And I don't think you'll get quite as much bad publicity as you think you will. I think, in fact, people will appreciate your originality. But of course, originality often requires a certain amount of courage. And the Moon, having made a conjunction to Chiron, does move into Taurus. Now that is a great sign change. Moon moving into Taurus, Moon moving into the sign of its exaltation. But the question is, what is your time zone? If you're in the Americas, certainly the Moon will be moving into Taurus today. It'll be moving into Taurus relatively early in the day, by this afternoon. If you're in California, by lunchtime this morning if you're in Hawaii. So if you are in the Americas with that change from the Moon moving into Taurus, it may take the pressure off you, and at the same time you may feel that you can start to do things your own way. And the Moon, when it does move into Taurus, it does make a square to Pluto, and so Moon square Pluto means that you Cancer, you perhaps you won't be in the mood for exercising responsibility, for being with other people. Not only will you not be in the mood, I don't think it'll be necessary anymore. And so Moon square Pluto, it can give you insights, and it can sort of allow you to think about what the next stage is and what kind of changes you need to make. And these are the kind of changes that are probably working on a fairly inner level. You don't have to involve other people with them, though Moon square Pluto, it can have a financial aspect or dimension to it. Moon square Pluto might encourage you to think about your various financial arrangements, existing arrangements. You might be thinking, well, maybe something needs to be changed, something isn't quite right, or maybe something needs to be verbalized in the end, not right now. So there is a complexity to Moon square Pluto, but being a Cancerian, I think that you can deal with this complexity. I don't think that's going to be much of a problem. Now, if you're not in the Americas, well, the Moon doesn't square Pluto until very late in the day, or even into tomorrow. So that's perhaps something we need to think about tomorrow, Thursday, rather than to worry about it today. Leo. The past. The past can be tempting. Things were perhaps easier in the past, and there is perhaps a temptation to go back to the past, especially now when the Sun is making a conjunction to the South Node. I should have talked about the Sun making a conjunction to the South Node at the beginning of this video. I didn't. That was a bit of an omission. But I'm telling you. And of course, the Sun is your ruler. So there is a risk at the moment, Leo, that rather than going forward, you go backwards. And the line of least resistance is very tempting. Whatever is easiest, whatever is least pressure, have a comfortable day. Try to have a comfortable day. But it's not the right thing to do. So you have to think about it. And when I say the right thing to do, I'm thinking about you, your destiny, where you're supposed to be going right now. And it's not just that the Sun is conjunct with South Node. Mercury is conjunct with moving towards a conjunction of the South Node as well. And so, how would I see this? I mean, the South Node is in Virgo, the Sun is in Virgo, and there may be a temptation, Leo, to just look at things on the surface. If you find what you're looking for, then that's enough. You stop. And why ask further questions? If you've reached that moment where you feel good, just stop worrying. That is the line of least resistance. Where you should be going, well, the South Node is in Virgo, conjunct the Sun. The North Node is in Pisces, and it's opposition the Sun. And so where you should be going is perhaps into the depths. You should not be satisfied. You should not be satisfied with the first answer you come across. The first answer you come across might be reassuring, it might be logical, but it's not necessarily the right answer, or at least it's not the right answer for you. And so, Leo, it's important that you are ready to look under the surface, and that you just aren't satisfied with whatever is easiest, because I just think you could. And additionally, there may be a financial side to this Sun conjunct with South Node. Perhaps seeing things in quite sort of crude terms, financially, just looking at the price of something, looking at a short-term reward, and not looking at the broader picture, or indeed a short-term loss. So the short-term and the long-term, in terms of money, could be important. So if you have a quick gain today, that might be a long-term loss. That is possible. And yes, and money is also a symbol of something. And so don't get too tied up with money, and don't get obsessed about very small amounts of money. Of course, very small amounts of money is relative. Whatever a very small amount of money is to you, don't get caught up by it, because it could just be the wrong thing to do. And you need to look at the wider picture, and you need to look at what's going on under the surface, and do think about social relations, how you get on with people, and how money is connected with that, and how your attitude to money is. And so making statements about money in public, or financial behavior in a public setting, you are showing something about yourself, whether or not you are mean or generous. And so do give that some attention. But in general today, there's just this danger that you just go back to the past. you go back to whatever is comfortable, and it may not be about money, it may be about something else. And so there could always be today a choice, particularly as the sun is in Virgo, a mutable sign. And so there's always a choice today. You can take this action or you can take that action. And your temptation is to take whatever is easiest, whatever is least complicated. And there's just a danger that when you make those choices, you tend to make the wrong choices. Choices that, okay, I'm not saying that anything disastrous is going to happen, but it might be choices that are wrong in a moral sense, and also in a sense of whatever your wider direction is. So do pay attention to things, and don't look at things on a purely surface level. I think that really is very important. And aside from that, we have a situation where the moon is changing signs. The moon is in sort of late Aries, getting ready to move into Taurus. In fact, this afternoon, if you're in the Americas, the moon will move into Taurus. And so that is a change. And so you've had the moon in Aries, and this has been a time, Leo, when you could maybe make some decisions. Well, not quite make decisions based on something new. Because you need to gather as much information as possible. Perhaps that's what you've been trying to do, and you have been trying to look at things on a sort of a broader level, and you've been trying, but of course now it's perhaps under threat because the sun is conjunct the South Node. And so in fact you could say that you know very well what is the right course of action, with the moon in Aries. You just know, it's obvious, but that doesn't mean to say you're going to follow your instincts. You might just do what is easiest and what makes you most comfortable. And as I've said, that is not the right thing to do. But when the moon moves into Taurus, that creates a change. The moon moves into an earth sign, and when the moon moves into Taurus, you start to think about what you need to do, and you start to become maybe more ambitious, but also aware of everything that is stopping you achieving whatever it is that you want to achieve. And so if you do feel a sense of powerlessness over the course of the day, when you look at the future and you look at what you really want to do, when you think about that moon square Pluto, don't exaggerate. Yes, there are things you have to get past, things that you have to manage, and at the same time, your imagination could be strong. You could be imagining that a problem is worse than it actually is, and in fact, it may not be a problem at all. And so, with the moon moving into Taurus, that is overall for you. Taurus is. Sorry, Leo. Leo, when the moon moves into Taurus, that's got to be good news, because the moon eventually will make a trine to Mercury and it will make a trine to the sun. So although today might not always be easy, by the end of the week, by Thursday, by Friday, things should be a lot easier, and you'll really get a sense of what to do and how best to do it, and hopefully you will get your priorities right. Virgo. I was just talking to Leo, and I was talking to Leo about the South Node. And the South Node is relevant. And the South Node in astrology does represent the line of least resistance. And it's often linked with karma and reincarnation. I mean, I don't really like talking about karma and reincarnation. I mean, I don't know what you believe in, but who am I to tell you about your past lives, for example, or what you should and shouldn't be doing from a karmic viewpoint? Still, the South Node does represent the past. It could represent yesterday. It could represent your childhood. It could represent, perhaps, a previous incarnation. And the South Node is then, whatever comes easiest. We know what we've done before. And it's always easiest to just live in the past. If something was comfortable, then just stick with it. And that might be how you feel at the moment. Not just today. Mercury is your ruler, and it's moving towards a conjunction of the South Node, and so the past is weighing in on you, and your response to the world as it is to look back at the past and to just do whatever feels easiest. And I'm not even saying that you shouldn't do what is easiest. If you want to do that, if it's coming together nicely, if you understand it, fair enough. But that does feel a bit empty. And ideally, you should be trying, if you possibly can, to be thinking about the other side of the equation, to be thinking about the North Node. The North Node is in Pisces. The North Node is in your opposite sign, and it's not just the North Node is in Pisces. You've now got Saturn in Pisces as well. So Saturn's gone back into Pisces, and so whatever you're doing, always consider the other, and the other, in most cases, many cases, is going to represent other people's interests. What other people find important, what kind of priorities other people have. If you completely think about yourself and what is easiest for yourself, then you could end up making mistakes, or you could end up potentially, upsetting someone, and you might come over as being selfish. You don't mean to come over as being selfish, but you could. And so think about the audience. The audience could be your family, it could be your friends, whoever else you have to deal with today. The audience could be perhaps your higher self, your conscience. Look at yourself, have some self-awareness, and then think about what is right. And it's not necessarily going to be easy. With the Sun and the Mercury conjunct the South Node, the pull of the past is going to be very strong, and it may be difficult to resist. And maybe it's right. Maybe you should focus on the past. Do what feels comfortable, but part of you needs to be aware of the other, at least making some effort to think about other people's feelings, other people's approach, and if you can do that, then I think that you will be appreciated. And if you start to make an effort to embrace the future, then the universe is going to reward you, and the universe is in the mood to reward you. If you look at things from a heliocentric viewpoint, so heliocentrically, we have got Mercury starting to make a sextile to Jupiter. We've got Mercury making a sextile to Venus, and so those aspects represent good fortune for you. And Venus is making a conjunction to Jupiter, so Mercury being your ruler, making aspects to Venus and Jupiter, that indicates to me that if you actually use those aspects, if you can get in touch with the cosmic picture, then it will be absolutely obvious to you what needs to be done, and also what parts of yourself and your talents and your abilities need to be emphasized at this particular moment in time. Virgos are very good at lots of different things. I mean, Virgos, though, they keep things to themselves. You might sort of know a Virgo, for example, and they only tell you half of what they can do. They might not tell you, for example, that they are an accomplished violinist, but they won't tell it because it's not important, maybe. But they will keep things to themselves, and perhaps you are keeping things to yourself. And there are different moments in life when different talents and different abilities are required. And right now, with those heliocentric aspects, the universe does want you to do particular things and to use some of your skills that you've been given, that you've perhaps developed in the past, and times are changing. And so something that you could ignore only a few days ago, something that you didn't have to talk about, you didn't have to use, it's now becoming relevant. And so do think about how clever you are, not in an arrogant way, but almost in a way of saying, well, you've got these gifts, and you've got to use these gifts, and the times are changing, and as the time's changing, new gifts have to be brought into play. Libra, you would like to be in control, and I think you can be in control. I mean, after all, Mars is still moving through your sign. Mars is a very assertive and dynamic planet, but the moon is moving through late Aries, your opposite sign, and there is this opposition aspect between the moon and Mars. And so this moon and Mars aspect, moon-Mars aspect, just could make things a bit difficult. And it might be, for example, that certain other people are just getting to be, too much of a good thing. You've given them space. Perhaps you've given them too much space. You've given them sort of too much of a chance. And so there might then, Libra, be a feeling of just wariness, that you've done your bit, you've tried your hardest, and you've had enough, and it's now time to move on. And it's absolutely understandable that you take that approach, and you perhaps regard things as just getting a bit complicated, and you just need to start to look after yourself. And that's all well and good, but you shouldn't be too negative. From a heliocentric view, if you look at the heliocentric chart, Venus is making a conjunction to Jupiter, starting to make a conjunction to Jupiter over the next couple of days. I mean, let me just actually remind you of the heliocentric chart. So if we put the Sun at the center of the solar system, where it should be, of course, you see that Venus, there's your ruler, making a conjunction to Jupiter, and Mercury is also making a sextile to Venus, and it's making a sextile to Jupiter. So this Venus conjunct Jupiter, which is going to be very, very powerful over the next couple of days, it really should work in your favor. And I know that things might not seem to be perfect right now, but that Venus conjunct Jupiter is, just asking you to see things in the best possible light. And perhaps you're being given an opportunity that you're just not really aware of at the moment. And it just, requires you to look at things in a new way, and not to get sort of completely caught up by, what is happening in the here and now. And that would be even more of a problem, of course, if you're actually having to deal with people. People are creating difficulties for you, and they could be with that moon opposition Mars. But you somehow need to move beyond the situation. And I think you can. And also, Libra, don't doubt your ability to look after yourself. You're able to, give as good as you get, especially on a verbal level. You have a way with words. You might not think you do, but you do. And if you are not happy about something, then be open about it. Be honest. The words will come together. Remember, Libra is an air sign. The air signs are about verbal communications. It can be, and also Mars is moving through Libra. So, if you feel you're being treated badly, or you feel that something needs to be said or explained, then go ahead. I think that you'll be, very effective, and you can bring to bear real emotional power, especially, towards the end of the day when the moon moves into Aries. I mean, it kind of depends where you are when the moon moves from out of Aries and into Taurus. So when the moon moves into Taurus, then I think that is a time when you really can get your emotional power, and you can, give the impression of, being a powerful person, not someone to be taken for granted. So, when you start today, don't assume that, everything is going to be a struggle, that things are difficult, that it might not be obvious what you should be doing. You might start the day having quite a sort of a negative view, but I don't think it's going to last for very long, and that you can make things better for yourself by really trying to cultivate positivity. Just remind yourself, heliocentrically, Venus is making a conjunction to Jupiter. Something out there wants you to be happy and successful and accomplished, and additionally, Venus is making a sextile to Mercury heliocentrically, and so that doesn't just allow you to speak well, it also allows you to make the most of what you have. And so there could be a transformational feel today. You start the day feeling under the weather, you feel that things aren't necessarily going your way, that there's opposition, that there's pressure, but you can just transform things, and you can look at things in a completely new way, and realize that things really are happening, and they're happening for you. And so, be optimistic. It's not just not just nice words on my part. It's real, and so there is potentially, Libra, a lot to look forward to. Scorpio. The moon is making an opposition to Mars, and that is possibly relevant. I mean, Mars is your ruler, and so if the moon is making an opposition to Mars, that can indicate irritation. It's something bothering you, something you didn't want it to bother you, but it is bothering you anyway. And so, think about what that irritation might be. And it might be, Scorpio, that there's just something you have to do that you don't want to do it, and it's maybe the absolute last thing you want to do. But when you do it, you're going to feel, a whole lot better, and it may not be quite as much effort as you'd imagined. So, don't be indecisive. If you're feeling bad, if you're feeling that something needs to change, well, then just change it. And even if it's boring, even if you're having to go over old ground, it's still, I think, worth doing. Now, at some stage during the day, it might be into tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon will change sign, and the moon will move out of Aries and into Taurus. So that means that the moon is moving into your opposite sign. And so when the moon moves into Taurus, you might be aware of outside influences, and you'll perhaps appreciate that you're not on your own, that you can't be on your own, that you really do have to take into account what is happening around you without losing any sense of power. You can stay powerful, but you just have to take on board what is happening, and perhaps try to understand what people are doing and what people are planning and what their motivations are, and not be overly threatened by it. Because when the moon moves into Taurus, it does make a square to Pluto, and so moon square Pluto can be quite threatening. I mean, at least it might feel threatening, that something might be trying to sort of disturb your peace of mind. You thought you'd resolved everything, and then something comes along, and you have to hold on tight, and you might become very concerned about how much power you have. But with moon square Pluto, you don't hold on too tightly, and really try to understand what is being communicated to you, and try to understand the kind of people you're dealing with, or not just people, it might be just forces, the forces around you. It's easy to regard them as being sort of random and uncontrollable and even ununderstandable. You don't know what's going on, you don't know what their motives are, you don't know what they're about, but that's not necessary. You can make an effort to try to comprehend the nature of these external forces, and I think because of that comprehension, you can start to feel better about the situation. Because once you start to understand it all, you're going to feel a lot more relaxed, and additionally, you're going to feel more in control, and you are in control, and you have the capacity to give as good as you get. That's true, and you can certainly assert yourself if need be, and if you need to make something happen quickly, if you are needed at a particular time, and you can act with great speed, a speed that may catch people unawares. Maybe you just look as if you're quite shy and retiring, maybe even a bit sluggish. That might be the impression you give, but that would be a false impression. And if need be, I think that you can, you can act with lightning speed, and you can resolve things very, very quickly. But the question is, will you? Will you have motivation? Sometimes Scorpios can be a bit slow when it comes to motivating themselves. They might think about, they might be thinking about the dangers. What would happen if they were to show their real power? What would happen? It could be dangerous. You never know how people are going to respond. But sometimes you have to, and so do be aware of how much control you have, even though it seems that you don't have much control at all. That's your first impression. Especially once the moon moves into Taurus, you see outside forces, and they just seem to be just too much for you. But that's just first impressions, and the reality is, Scorpio, that things can happen your way, and you don't have to just be passive, and perhaps you don't have to sort of be completely sort of risk averse and sort of hide. It is unnecessary, and I think that you can, in the end, be confident in your abilities and your power. Sagittarius. For some of the day, the moon is moving through Aries, and perhaps for all of the day if you're in Asia or Australasia. But while the moon is moving through Aries, you're trying to make the most of everything. You're perhaps trying to enjoy yourself, and it's not necessarily easy. And the reason it might not be easy because you've taken things as far as you can go, as far as you want to go, and now it's just becoming it's becoming more difficult. It's becoming sort of more difficult to be enthusiastic. And if you do try to be enthusiastic, are you going to get a sufficient support? And so, don't think that things need to just continue as they have done. And perhaps now is a time, as the moon moves through late Aries and into Taurus, that you need to decide what is important and make sure that everything is on a stable footing. And if you have enjoyed something in the past, and if you want to enjoy it in the future, then you have to ground it. And that won't necessarily be easy, and you're probably not helped by the attitude of other people who were maybe amusing enough in the recent past, but now people are becoming edgy. They're on edge, and a lot of people are on edge, and they might even be sort of argumentative, and they're not necessarily prepared to reveal what's on their mind. There's a lot of things that are being hidden, and that really may be further spoiling things. Of course, the more in control you are, the less you are reliant on other people, then probably the easier it's going to be. And it's going to be easier to make your own decisions, to make your own choices. And over the next few days, you have a chance to sort of perhaps work things through, on your own, without getting caught up in other people's worries and concerns. Though do be careful where you put your energy. I mean, Sagittarius is a high energy sign, and you want to do something. You want to feel that you're doing something of value, but just don't do something just for the sake of it, just because it's a good way of expending energy. It could be, for example, that you decide to start something without really thinking it through, and it may be something in the house, or something very grounded. Maybe it's to do with a piece of equipment, and you get involved in it, and it seems to be straightforward, but you start getting involved in it, and it quickly becomes complicated, messy, and maybe you can't deal with it anymore. So avoid starting difficult tasks, problematic tasks, and that doesn't apply just to things. It also might apply to people. You might want to start talking to someone, perhaps about a difficult subject. You start putting your energy into something, and then you quickly realize that you're in over your head. You're dealing with something that is far more complicated than you'd realized. So probably it's not a good time to be starting work on something which could remotely be complicated, even if you just have a vague suspicion that it might be complicated, but you're dealing with something that is over your head. Or even if you might be dealing with something that's over your head, just don't go down that road. Leave it for later. Leave it a couple of days, and I think if you leave it a couple of days, you'll be in a better position to deal with it. Perhaps also, if you're contemplating something which might be difficult, might take a difficult turn, maybe you need to find out about it. Do some research, read about it, look on the internet, see how other people have coped with a similar situation, and then you might realize then that you are taking on quite a lot, and that's not necessarily something that you want to do. Capricorn, you have been, over the last couple of days, I think, quite insular. You haven't really wanted to engage. It just had perhaps been just too much effort, and you also know that once you start engaging with people, they engage back, and you might be into something that you don't necessarily want to continue with. And so it's been better to just stay put and not make a big fuss about anything. But there is pressure. The moon is making an opposition to Mars, and so you've got the moon in Aries making an opposition to Mars, and so however much you try to keep things simple, keep a low profile, you're not being ignored. You exist. You have a presence, and other people want to know where you are. They want to know what you're doing, and they possibly want you to come out of hiding. And the question is, how do you respond to the situation? I think that there is a possibility of friction here. It may not be that you have an argument with another person, but just things that you're being pressurized to deal with, and you just don't want to do it, and you feel just annoyed about it. And it may be tempting to just give in to the pressure and to sort of come out of hiding and to interact. But I don't think it's going to be particularly satisfactory. And whatever you apply yourself to, when you apply real energy to something, it may just be slower than expected. And so it might be, Capricorn, that the results you get today are disappointing. You thought you were going to achieve A, B, and C, but you put the energy in, and it's just not there. And it's probably best, Capricorn, that you just accept the situation. It's not going to be a day that is especially satisfactory, although that does depend to an extent on where you are. Now, if you are in the Americas, the moon does move into Taurus this afternoon, or even this morning if you're in Hawaii. And so if you are in the Americas, things are probably better, because when the moon moves into Taurus, that is a big change. The moon moves into an earth sign. The moon is exalted in Taurus, and as the moon moves into Taurus, probably you're going to feel better about yourself. You're going to feel sort of more optimistic, and you'll have a greater sense of what you can do. And additionally, you might be just enjoying yourself more. There may be more things to amuse you, and your sense of humor might improve. And if your sense of humor is improving, then that's going to have a positive effect on everyone around you. Now, if you're in Europe, the moon doesn't move into Taurus until late in the evening. I mean, I don't know what you're doing this evening, but if you're having a busy evening and a late evening in Europe, and perhaps Africa as well, then there might be a change, an hour or two before midnight, when you suddenly just feel a whole lot better about yourself. So that might be something to look forward to. But if you're having an early night, or if you're in Asia or Australasia, then don't worry. The moon will move into Taurus tomorrow on Thursday. So if you are feeling sorry for yourself, Capricorn, and it feels that you can't do anything, then don't worry. Things are about to change. When the moon moves into Taurus, it will make a trine to Mercury. It will make a trine to the sun. So I think that Capricorn, tomorrow, Thursday, is just going to be a lot better than today, Wednesday. I mean, I'm not even saying that today is going to be particularly bad. I just think that today might be just a time when you don't feel especially certain of yourself. Especially if there's pressure, if there's external pressure. I don't think you're going to deal very well with that external pressure, and it just might be best to just temporarily just batten down the hatches and wait for things to change. Aquarius. I think it may not be a particularly easy day. I mean, it will be difficult to get things done. I mean, that might be the problem. You have ideas about what you could do, what you would like to do, but when it actually gets down to sort of putting theory into practice, that's when the problems start. And the more energy you put into something, the more difficult it becomes. So, Aquarius, I would warn you about trying to accomplish too much, particularly on a sort of a material, practical level. You can try your hardest, but even then, it might not work out. And instead, it might be better if you sort of work at the level of sort of ideas, thinking about what you might like to do in the future. Things can change, and so you could plan, you could talk, get other people's opinions, and at the same time, don't take anything too seriously. Avoid getting involved in big ideas. Particularly if they're big controversial ideas. Different people have different opinions, and it's going to be quite easy to get people annoyed, get people angry. I suppose there might be clashes about sort of ideas and perhaps even politics as well. So if you are talking, it's a good idea to talk, but don't talk about anything especially controversial. And as far as other people and relationships are concerned, the Sun is conjunct the South Node. This could be a problem. The South Node is, or can be, a malefic energy, and it may say something about the past. And some of the people you come into contact with may be being pulled by the past. They may find it difficult to embrace the future, and their own behavior patterns could be troublesome. They might be doing things that you thought that they had grown out of, behaviors which just are not working out. They're not relevant to the here and now, and so other people might then have the capacity to sort of take you down with them as well. So this means that you have to be, very careful, both in a sort of in group settings, in one-to-one settings. If you're dealing with people who are being very insistent, who have ideas, who have suggestions, ask yourself, why are they suggesting what they're suggesting? Why are they doing what they're doing? And if you scratch the surface, you might find that the reason they are behaving as they are is because they want an easy life, because they're doing things that are comfortable for them right now, and they're not thinking about the future, and they're not thinking about what is the best solution. And so perhaps this is a time when you need to be in firm control, and certainly not take what anyone says at face value. And this is especially the case if anyone is making things complicated. If you hear someone making something complicated, you want to do something, perhaps it seems quite straightforward, and someone says, no, you can't do this because of A, B, and C, or something like that, then that is a potential issue there. You might find that you're being yourself reminded of your own past and being pulled in a direction that you thought you had grown out of. And so other people need to be treated with caution, and you shouldn't necessarily believe that they know what they're doing, or that they're acting in your best interests, or even in their best interests. Pisces. Today there is a conjunction between the Sun and the South Node. And I think this South Node Sun conjunction may be relevant to you. And it may say something about the pull of outside forces. And it might be relatively easy to just give in to what other people are saying, doing what you're told, trying to keep everyone happy. It's just easiest that way, isn't it? But the Sun conjunct the South Node is a direction that I don't think that you should be following. It might be easier. We can see the South Node as a line of least resistance, and as a Pisces, you often you do like to keep everyone happy. You can be quite flexible, but you can be too flexible, and you need to remember that things have changed. Saturn has just gone back into your sign. Saturn is in your sign, and the North Node is in your sign, and the North Node represents the direction you should be taking. And so with the Sun conjunct the South Node, you need to ignore this pressure. You need to really be putting yourself first. So if you've got an argument, you've got your view, you've got another person's view. It might not be an argument about anything that appears to be particularly crucial, but even then, I think it's important that you hold your ground and realize that you're the one with the answers. And additionally, you do have to think about yourself. We can live in a sort of dog eat dog world where everyone is trying to get the better of everyone else, and you can be at the receiving end of other people's machinations, and you need to hold firm. And I think you can hold firm. You might not think that it is possible, but it really is. And if you make it clear what is acceptable, you make it clear that you've got your own interests, I think in the end people will listen. And additionally, Pisces, remember that from a heliocentric point of view, Venus is making a conjunction to Jupiter. So over the next day or two, Venus is moving very close to Jupiter. Jupiter is your ruler, and this is a very fortunate aspect. Venus and Jupiter are the two benefics, and so this heliocentric conjunction indicates that at a high level something is working for you. And if we're talking about the nodes, and we're talking about, what is your direction and what is not your direction, your direction is, or should be, clear to you. That Venus-Jupiter conjunction, heliocentric conjunction, represents some kind of cosmic force that is working on your behalf, that wants you to be successful, that wants you to look after yourself, that wants to make sure that you're able to find the right path for yourself. And so if you go beyond the sort of the external pressure, people, organizations, institutions telling you should do this and that, and believing you just have to give in. Well, if you can go beyond that, then Pisces, you can really tune into what makes you different and what makes you unique. And additionally, Saturn is now in your sign. I need to keep reminding you at the moment of this, that Saturn is about you holding firm. And if you do hold firm, if you can hold firm today, then you will definitely be doing the right thing. So those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And I'm now going to look at things from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I ask the question, what is Wednesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 13, which is fellowship with others. So other people matter. And you have to consider the social environment and who are you reliant on and who is relying on you. And this hexagram is about the development of various relationships. I mean, I don't think it's really one-to-one relationships. It's more sort of collective relationships and how you relate to the world at large. Even if you don't have anyone around you, even if you're isolated, you still have a relationship here with the world around you. And so this is about how this relationship develops, and it's going to be sort of more important, this hexagram, if you do encounter a lot of people over the day, or if you're for example, you're working, or you're working certainly in a situation where there are lots of people to deal with, lots of people that you have to be concerned about. Now, there are 3 moving lines here. The second line moves, the third line moves, and the second line moves from the bottom, fourth line from the bottom moves, and also the fifth line from the bottom as well. And so that second line moving does indicate that there's a lot of strife going on, and there are different people competing with each other, and it's very easy to become aligned with one faction or another, and it's not about sort of universal harmony. It's more about how I am different from another person, or rather how my group is different from the other group. It might be sort of in-group, out-group, and all that kind of thing. And so this factionalism, could be a problem. And even if there aren't any factions, if you've just got you're in a single group, and you've got a lot of people who have a lot to do with each other, sort of working with each other, for example, they could end up attacking each other, and that's obviously not a particularly desirable situation. And so you have to work for reconciliation, maybe. And with the fourth line, I think that you can find reconciliation. So if you have recently fallen out with people, not necessarily just one person, but groups of people, and you feel alienated, then maybe there is a way of bridging the gap. And then the fifth line moves. And the fifth line is a pretty fortunate line. And the fifth line is about people that have a connection with one another but don't recognize it. You might feel alienated from another person, as I've already said, but it may feel that there's just no chance, no hope. But perhaps you and another person kind of belong with one another, or perhaps you belong in a particular social setting, but so far you felt that you couldn't get there, that the circumstances weren't right. But there can be, in the end, a feeling of belonging and getting on with people. But it is a real struggle. And then, because we've got moving lines, we move to a second hexagram, and the hexagram we move to is hexagram number 26, which is the taming power of the great. And the taming power of the great is really telling us that we shouldn't try to take things too far. There are things going on. We saw in the previous hexagram, fellowship with others. That there's a lot of rivalry, that people don't necessarily get on with each other, and it's tempting to throw ourselves into the fray and to get worked up about it all. But we need to just hold back, keep calm, and remind ourselves of where we have come from. And with the taming power of the great, do think about the past. and the morality of the past. And that perhaps is what the great is about. The great is about everything we've come from, perhaps we've learnt in a distant past, perhaps as a child or decades ago, there was a sort of moral code that we were aware of, and we need to perhaps review this moral code, and perhaps we have our own rules which we've perhaps forgotten, but now we can get back into that, and we can realize that there is a right way of doing things, and we just don't have to be in a rush, and we need to be ready to sort of put ourselves under the control of something that is higher than ourselves. And that thing that is higher than ourselves could be the past. And the weight of the past is strong today because the Sun is conjunct the South Node. And I think with this hexagram, the Sun conjunct the South Node is perhaps being seen in a positive light. I mean, I know that when I was going through the 12 signs, I was quite negative about the Sun conjunct the South Node. But maybe there is a positive side to it. The past should not be neglected, and the past might guide the future. So it's now time to go back to the astrology, and I want to quickly look at what's been going on in France. And of course, it's not finished. I mean, at least the news as I understood it just before I made this video. I'm making this video on Tuesday morning, or even though it is a video for Wednesday. And as far as I know, that in France, the Prime Minister, François Bayrou, had lost a confidence motion, and there he has handed in his resignation. I think he's still Prime Minister until Macron has chosen a successor. And things are not necessarily going to become any clearer. Well, I think if you look at what's going on astrologically, things might actually move from bad to worse. So, let's start off by looking at the chart of the vote of the no confidence vote. So here is the chart. I made it 7 o'clock in the evening, when it was something around 7 o'clock that the confidence vote came in. This was a vote in the National Assembly, and it was an overwhelming vote. It was completely expected. It wasn't a surprise, and there was an exact Moon-Saturn conjunction on conjunct Skeet. So there is 29. The Moon was at 29 degrees 2. This is Monday, 7 p.m. in Paris. And so the Moon was at 29 degrees 2 Pisces. Saturn was at 29.28 Pisces. So an exact Moon-Saturn conjunction on Skeet. And that perhaps indicates that this event, although predicted, may be quite disastrous for one reason or another. It's certainly not going to help France, and it's not going to help France feel at ease with itself. I mean, by the way, I should say that if you are French, and I seem to be critical or sort of France, and I'm regarding France as perhaps being a potential disaster. My country is the UK, and if France is in bad shape, Britain is in even worse shape. So I mean, I do get that. I mean, France has got some advantages over Britain. At least France has got a functioning industrial capacity, unlike Britain, where it's from an industrial perspective, it's just all about sort of services, and Britain's never recovered from the damage that Margaret Thatcher caused with the destruction of Britain's industrial base. Anyway, but we are talking about France, and I will be talking about the UK as well. I mean, I do talk about UK, both France and Britain. They just have a link with one another. Those two countries. They seem to be sort of acting in unison. Maybe it just would be better if Britain and France were just to unite. There was actually a suggestion, I think in the 1950s, just after the Second World War, that Britain and France should join together into one country, but obviously nothing came of that. So anyway, going back to the result, I think that Moon-Saturn conjunction just says it all. I mean, that says just what we need to know. It is it is a disastrous event, even though it was widely predicted. And we've got the Sun moving towards a conjunction of the South Node. Some things just continue. The Sun in the South Node is like the past. Something being played over and over again. This record is getting boring, but we're just seeing it happen. And it just won't stop. But what is more relevant is how this result impacted some of the key players, and one of those players was François Bayrou, who is here. Here is his. No, that's the full moon before he was born. Hold on, the full moon before the vote. Hold on, let me find François Bayrou's chart. Here is François Bayrou's chart. And so François Bayrou is a Gemini. He's got a lot of planets in the air sign. So he is from the right, and he was born in 1951. So he's 74 years old. So he's getting on. He's getting on, but. He's got a nice Venus in Cancer on the midheaven, so that's a good place for Venus to be. But he's got a Sun-Mars conjunction in Gemini, and that Sun-Mars Gemini and conjunction in Gemini in the 8th house is rather troublesome. Obviously I'm sure had a very successful career one way or another, but there might be a sense in which he sort of attracts conflict. And additionally, he has Neptune rising, so perhaps it's sometimes difficult to work out what exactly he is intending. Now, as far as how he was impacted by the vote, the vote. Hold on, sorry about this. Here's the result. Okay, so here's the result. So Jupiter, at the time of the vote, was at 19 degrees Cancer, and so Jupiter's exactly on. Well, not exactly on his midheaven, but it was on his midheaven in the run-up to this vote of no confidence, and Jupiter was on his Venus. But Jupiter on the midheaven. In astrology, I have noticed that often is about the beginning of a job, or the beginning of getting a job or losing a job. It's one or the other. And you would have thought, Jupiter in Cancer, well, it's you would have thought that's quite useful, in its exaltation. And so you'd thought that'd be more about getting a job rather than losing a job. But maybe it just doesn't matter what sign it's in. Jupiter is just the fact that Jupiter is conjunct his midheaven, and that's it, and that's all there is to be said. And Uranus is reasonably close to his Mars, and so with Uranus conjunct his Mars, he might be tempted to push things, as far as he can, and that's what he did. And also with his chart, he's experiencing a nodal return. So his North Node is at 15 degrees Pisces, and the North Node was at 18 degrees Pisces at the time of the vote. So the nodal return really does seem to represent the end of his political career. I would guess this is the end of his political career. He is 74 years old. He's not going to be standing for the presidency, is he? And so he's also got Jupiter on the midheaven. So Jupiter on the midheaven would be a good sign that something is coming to an end. And so that's that's one thing about his chart. And another thing is North Node at 15 degrees 29 Pisces. We just had a full moon, and so this full moon was on September the 7th, and this full moon the full moon eclipse, the total eclipse, was at 15 degrees 23 Pisces. So his north node is at 15 degrees 29 Pisces. So this total eclipse right on his nodal axis. And, you know, again, it's perhaps a karmic point, a point of destiny, and, you know, it's over for him. And that's what that full moon indicated. And then we have Emmanuel Macron. So here is Emmanuel Macron's chart, a chart that we look at, you know, rather a lot. And what is really important at the moment for Emmanuel Macron, something I've talked about a lot in the past, is his conjunction between the Sun and Mercury at 29 Sagittarius. And, you know, that is important. Yeah, okay, not just because he's got a combust Mercury, or is it combust, or is it? Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is combust. It's not Cazimi combust. I think it is. It is Cazimi. It's not quite close enough to treat it as Cazimi. But, you know, his Macron's Mercury is terrible. I mean, I know that Macron is really intelligent. I mean, whatever you think about him, he is intelligent. I regard Macron as being just complete wasted talent. I think he could have done so much for Europe and avoided conflict, and he came over as being the adult in the room. But then, you know, you look at how he behaved with the Ukraine conflict, and I don't know. It's quite amazing how Macron has just not used his abilities. And maybe that's connected with his Mercury. Mercury combust. It's in Sagittarius. It's in its detriment. It's retrograde. So his Mercury is a train wreck, and I think we've been seeing that over the last couple of years. His decisions and his choices. You know, his decision, what was it, last year to call an election, and the whole way he's handled the Ukraine issue. He has just alienated the Russians. He could have done something at an early stage to stop this conflict getting out of hand, but he didn't. He could have been the adult in the room, and he just blew it. And so that might be something to do with the Sun conjunct Mercury. And this Sun conjunct Mercury is, of course, being activated by Saturn. Saturn has just gone back into Pisces, so that means that Saturn is square his Sun-Mercury conjunction. And if we compare Macron's chart with that vote on Monday, remember there was a conjunction between the Moon and Saturn at 29 Pisces, and that conjunction between Moon and Saturn at 29 Pisces is exactly square his Sun-Mercury conjunction. So at the moment he's got Saturn square Mercury, he's got Saturn square the Sun, and the Moon was, you know, being, you know, the trigger for it all. So I think that Moon-Saturn conjunction is really very impressive in terms of its power. And, you know, Macron is not going to be left alone. I should make that clear. This is not as bad as it gets for Macron. And what we should be looking forward to, and when I say looking forward to, it's not saying because it's a good thing, but what we should be starting to focus on is the new moon eclipse, partial eclipse coming up on the 21st. And so here is the new moon eclipse, and that's set for Westminster. Let's set that for Paris. So here's the new moon eclipse taking place on September the 21st, just before the equinox. And this new moon eclipse is at 29 degrees 5 Virgo, and it's opposition Saturn. And so going back to Emmanuel Macron's chart, the new moon eclipse is going to be again, it's going to be square his Sun-Mercury conjunction. So he's getting really hit by it all. So if you think that things can't get any worse for Macron, well, they can get worse for Macron. And I think that this full moon eclipse opposition Saturn really does hit him. I don't know what he's going to do. He's got to find another prime minister, and he's got the French economy to worry about as well. And then there is Marine Le Pen. Now, with Marine Le Pen, here is her chart. I have with Marine Le Pen. I sometimes, when I look at her chart, I always sometimes feel a bit sorry for her. That's not a statement about my opinion on her policies, but she does have a difficult chart. And maybe she's unlucky as well. She's done pretty well, but there seems to be a sadness there. I always just get that feeling with Marine Le Pen. And she has Saturn in Aries in the 7th house, and Saturn in Aries, it's in its fall in Aries, and it's in the 7th house. So that's not a great place for Saturn, and so and I think that she maybe, I don't know, being unlucky, and of course she's got these sort of legal problems at the moment. And so as far as what's happening at the moment, now she's got her ascendant at 15 Libra. Now 1529 Libra. It was kind of interesting that François Bayrou has got his ascendant at 13.9 Libra. It's not exactly 13.9 Libra. Bayrou was born in a town called Bordeaux, which is quite close to the city of Pau. I mean, I couldn't find Bordeaux on the list in my astrology program, so I put in Pau as well. I mean, there's about a 10 arc-minute difference in in the ascendant, so it's not a particularly significant difference, especially as I'm not doing anything like primary directions. And so Bayrou's ascendant is at 13.9 Libra, and Marine Le Pen's ascendant is at 15.29 Libra, and so that means that her midheaven is pretty close to where Bayrou's midheaven is. Her midheaven is at 1941 Cancer. And so if you look at what's happening with Marine Le Pen, she has Jupiter about to hit her midheaven. And I think that is really interesting. Now, I've just said with Bayrou that with Jupiter on the midheaven can be about the gaining of a job or the losing of a job. Now, in Bayrou's case, it's clearly about the losing of a job. Now, in Marine Le Pen's case, Jupiter exactly on her midheaven at the time of this vote. Now, we know she's got legal issues. That I think she's got an appeal coming up. I think it's at the beginning of next year, because she's been banned from seeking further election. Isn't that right? Yeah. So because of some misuse of funds in the European Parliament. But right now, Jupiter on the midheaven, I would see that as being a positive, because she's not going to lose a job right now. I mean, that's not what's going to happen. She's just had this vote. She's in a powerful position, temporarily, maybe. Now, I don't know enough about French politics to say, well, can she become prime minister? I mean, would Macron choose her as prime minister? I mean, it fits the astrology for her to become prime minister. But as I understand it, just looking at the newspapers and commentary, that she's not people aren't suggesting that she's going to become prime minister. But would she accept the job? I don't know. What would they call it? Is it cohabitation? Is that you might have her as prime minister and the president? They're in opposition to each other, but they have to work together. I don't know. But it's still, this Jupiter on the midheaven does give a boost to her profile. And although I think that there are a lot of problems in her chart, I think that right now she has an opportunity to really make the most of a very sort of obviously a difficult situation, and a difficult situation for France. And then there is France itself, and so here's the chart for France. I've gone for 6:42 p.m., which is when the seal was placed on the Fifth Republic Constitution. It is one chart. It's one chart for France. Of course, there are sort of lots of other charts one can use for France, including the fall of the Bastille. But this Uranus going stationary retrograde. Remember, Uranus over the weekend went stationary retrograde at 1 degree 28 Gemini. And Mars is in the Fifth Republic chart is at 2 degrees 26 Gemini. So Uranus went stationary within 1 degree of France's, the Fifth Republic's Mars. And so that is an aggressive event. It creates a lot of anger. And of course, you've got sort of demonstrations and strikes. Haven't the air traffic controllers are about to go on strike, isn't that right? And that Mars is in the second house, so it's about money, it's about the budget, and of course France, like many countries, including Britain, has got all sorts of budgetary problems. There's just simply there isn't enough money to go around. There isn't enough money to pay for the welfare state and everything else, and so you have to do something. You have to make cuts. You have to increase the pensionable age and so on. Of course, French are not very happy about that, and so it's that Uranus hitting Mars in the second house certainly seems to fit what is happening at the moment. And you've got Mars is square Pluto, so that really does unleash things. So I don't want to say anything more. We don't know who the next prime minister is going to be. When there is a next prime minister, I'll do another video on France. But I think it's not all done. From an astrological point of view, we do have to look at Macron. Macron is the head of state. He is the king, kind of. And so with this eclipse coming up, this partial eclipse coming up in 2 weeks, nearly 2 weeks, which is square his Sun-Mercury conjunction. It all seems to be falling apart, and we'll have to monitor the situation. And I'll be talking about France again very soon. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.